The baby was dying. Not slowly, not peacefully. Right now, right here, on the freezing marble floor of an $80 million mansion. 14 doctors stood paralyzed. Millions of dollars in medical equipment lay scattered like shattered promises. The heart monitor shrieked into the night at 2:47 a.m., and the most powerful man in New York's underworld was on his knees, begging. "Please," he whispered, his voice shattering like glass. "I'll give you everything. Just save her." But no one could, until she walked in. She was 26, olive-skinned with dark brown hair tied neatly back. Her simple black and white nanny uniform looked almost absurd among the chaos of medical equipment and panicking professionals. But her face was calm, hard with determination, as if she had walked through fire before and knew exactly how to survive it. Elena Vasquez pushed through the crowd of frozen doctors and trembling nurses. Most people in the room did not even know her name. She had been hired only 1 week ago, a quiet girl who kept to herself and sang Spanish lullabies to the baby at night. Marco Santini, Dante's head of security, stepped into her path. His massive body filled the space in front of her like a wall of muscle and suspicion. "Ma'am, this is a medical emergency," he said, his voice cold as steel. "You need to step back. I think I know what's wrong with the baby." Elena's voice stayed level, strangely certain. "Please, let me try." Marco's eyes narrowed. In 8 years working for Dante Romano, he had never seen his boss allow anyone outside his most trusted circle to come this close in a crisis. This nameless nanny had no business being here. "They've run every test," Marco said. "They've tried every protocol. There's no way, please." Elena's dark brown eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice did not waver. "I've seen this before. Back in my village in New Mexico, my grandmother treated cases like this. Just give me 30 seconds. Something in her voice made Marco hesitate. He turned to look at his boss. Dante Romano knelt on the cold marble, his gray eyes wild with desperation. The most powerful man in New York's underworld looked like a broken animal, ready to grasp at any hope, no matter how impossible. "Let her through," Dante ordered, his voice raw. "For God's sake, let her try anything." The medical team parted like the Red Sea. Elena dropped to her knees beside Lucia on the freezing marble floor. She studied the baby's face, the bluish-purple lips, the still chest, the tiny fingers that had stopped moving. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone trained by something older than medical school. Something passed down through generations of healers who never wore white coats or wrote prescriptions. Then she did something that made everyone in the room freeze in horror. Elena picked up a blue plastic cup from the scattered equipment, filled it with ice-cold water from a nearby bottle, and gently poured it over the baby's face. "What are you doing?" The lead doctor lunged forward. "You'll kill her." The nurses rushed to stop her. Marco's hand flew to his gun, not sure whether this woman was trying to save Lucia or harm her. Dante's eyes went wide with fury and terror, his body coiling to attack. But before anyone could touch Elena, the miracle happened. Lucia coughed. Her tiny body jolted. Water ran from her small mouth. And then, for the first time in 4 terrifying minutes, she drew in a breath. A beautiful, ragged breath that carried life back into her. Then another. And another. The room fell into absolute silence. 14 medical professionals stared at the baby, then at the nanny, then back at the baby. Pink began to return to Lucia's cheeks. Her small fists twitched, weak but real. Her gray eyes fluttered open, revealing the same storm-colored irises as her father. And then she began to cry. The most beautiful sound anyone in that room had ever heard. Dante Romano collapsed beside his daughter. The crime boss, the killer, the man who had never shown weakness to anyone, sobbed openly as he gathered Lucia into his arms. He held her tight as if he would never let go again, his whole body shaking. The doctor in the white coat stepped closer, his voice barely more than a whisper. "How did you know to do that?" Elena looked up at him, tears sliding down her cheeks. "My grandmother taught me. It's an old remedy. Sometimes with certain conditions, a baby's body forgets how to breathe. Cold water shocks the system. It reminds the body to fight. That isn't in any medical textbook I've ever read." "No," Elena said softly. "It isn't in books. It's in the heart, passed down from grandmother to mother, from mother to daughter, through generations." Marco watched Elena with a mix of shock and suspicion. How could this young woman with no medical degree, no modern equipment, no connection to their world do what 14 trained professionals could not? Who was she really? But before anyone could ask who she was, the doctor frowned at his tablet. "Wait," he said slowly, scrolling through the preliminary scan results. His face tightened with worry. "Something else is going on here. Something we missed." He looked up, his eyes moving from the baby to Dante. "I think we need to get Lucia to the hospital immediately." He paused, fear flickering across his face. "I think it will happen again." The helicopter tore through the night sky like a black blade. Its rotors howled above the Thornton estate as the medical team hurriedly lifted baby Lucia onto the gurney. Dante stayed right behind them, his bloodshot eyes never leaving his daughter for even a second. His expensive suit was rumpled, stained with dried tears on the collar where he had held her against his chest. "Get on," Dante said to Elena without turning around. His voice was a command that did not allow discussion. Marco stood by the helicopter door, eyes wide with disbelief. In 8 years working for Dante Romano, he had never seen his boss allow anyone outside his most trusted circle to come this close in a crisis. Yet this nameless nanny, hired less than a week ago, was now climbing into the private helicopter of the most powerful mafia boss in New York. Elena said nothing. She stepped into the cabin, sat beside Lucia's gurney, and placed her hand over the tiny chest that rose and fell in a weak flutter. "The breathing is still there," she told herself like a prayer. "Still there." 20 minutes later, they touched down on the roof of the most exclusive private hospital in the city. A medical team was already waiting, led by Dr. Jonathan Pierce, a salt-and-pepper-haired man with a stern face and decades of experience behind his eyes. They rushed Lucia into the pediatric emergency unit. Tests came in waves: blood work, brain scans, heart monitors, lung function, everything. An hour later, Dr. Pierce stepped out of the examination room with a folder in his hand and heaviness written across his face. "We found the problem," he said, his voice low and careful. Dante moved toward him like a predator. "Say it." "Lucia has a syndrome called CCHS, congenital central hypoventilation syndrome." Dr. Pierce paused, drawing a slow breath. "It's also known as Ondine's curse." "What curse?" Dante snarled. "It's a folk name for the condition. In mythology, Ondine was a water nymph who cursed her unfaithful lover. If he ever fell asleep, he would forget how to breathe and die." The doctor looked Dante straight in the eyes. "Your daughter has that exact condition. Her brain doesn't send the automatic signal to breathe when she sleeps. Her body forgets how to breathe. Silence, thick and suffocating. Can it be cured?" Dante's voice sounded strangled. "Doctor." Pierce shook his head slowly. "There is no cure. CCHS is a rare genetic disorder affecting the autonomic nervous system. Right now, there are only 2 options. 1 lifelong ventilator support every night when she sleeps. 2 surgery to implant a diaphragm pacemaker that stimulates the body to breathe. "The surgery," Dante said immediately. "Do it. The success rate is approximately 70% for an infant this young." And even then, Dante slammed his fist onto the nearest table. The glass surface shattered under the force, blood seeping from cuts across his knuckles. But he did not flinch. "I don't care how much it costs. Fix her. Money doesn't buy everything, Mr. Romano." In a blink, Dante grabbed the doctor by the collar and yanked him close. Veins stood out at his temples, his gray eyes burning with the fury of a cornered animal. "Then find someone whose life is valuable enough to trade. Because if my daughter dies, I will burn this hospital to the ground with everyone inside." Dr. Pierce went pale. For the first time in his career, he was truly afraid. Threatening him won't save Lucia. The voice cut through the room like a blade. Dante turned, startled. Elena stood there, back straight, dark brown eyes fixed on him without an ounce of fear. Then she did what no one had ever dared to do. She laid her hand on Dante's arm and pulled him away from the doctor. "Let him do his job," she said, calm but unyielding. "Lucia needs you clear-headed, not in jail for assault." Dante stared at her, really looked at her for the first time. No one touched him without permission. No one ordered him around. No one dared. Yet this girl, this nameless nanny, had just done both without trembling. Slowly, one finger at a time, Dante released Dr. Pierce, but his gaze remained locked on Elena, something unreadable flickering in those storm-gray eyes. "Doctor." Pierce adjusted his collar, struggling to regain composure. "The surgery will be tomorrow morning when the best surgical team is available. But tonight, someone must stay with her. If Lucia stops breathing again before the operation," he did not need to finish. Everyone understood. "I'll do it," Elena said, her voice as steady as if she had offered to make a cup of tea. "I'll stay awake and watch her all night." Dante turned to her, his brow furrowing. "Why?" Elena did not answer right away. She looked through the glass into the room where Lucia lay, amid wires and machines small and fragile like a petal that could wither at any moment. Her heart clenched. Another image rose over it. Another baby. Another hospital room. Blood and tears and the sound of her own screaming. "Because she needs me," Elena said at last, her voice light as breath. "And maybe I need her too." She did not know why she had volunteered, but something inside her whispered that this child needed her the same way she somehow needed this child. 3 months before that fateful night, Elena Vasquez stood on the edge of the Rio Grande Bridge, ready to die. The night wind of Albuquerque stung her face, whipping her tangled brown hair into a frantic halo. Below, the river churned through the darkness, black as ink, black as nothingness, black as a promise of release. It was 2 a.m. The streets were empty, no cars passed, no witnesses, just Elena and the void waiting beneath her feet. She was 26 years old, but her eyes were hollow like someone who had lived through 100 years of suffering. Her olive skin looked drained beneath the sickly yellow streetlights, pale as paper, stretched too thin over bones that had forgotten what proper meals felt like. Her trembling hands gripped the freezing metal railing. The sleeves of her thin jacket rode up, revealing the scars on her wrists, faded pink lines that told the story of a night 6 months ago when she had tried this before and failed. She would not fail tonight. Images slid through her mind like a film strip, snapping and skipping. Brandon's fist. His face warped by rage. The punch driven straight into her stomach when she was 7 months pregnant. She remembered hitting the kitchen floor. She remembered pain tearing through her belly like lightning. She remembered blood, so much blood spreading across the white tile like a stain that would never wash away. Lucas and Leo, her twin boys, the sons she had already named, the sons she had dreamed about every night, dead inside her because of the hands of their own father. Then came the courthouse, Brandon's lawyers twisting every word, his accusations that she had killed her own children on purpose. 8 months in prison, waiting for a trial that felt like it would never come. 8 months of concrete walls and metal bars and the guard who came to her cell at night when no one was watching. She had screamed. No one listened. Prisoners don't get believed. When the neighbor's security camera finally proved that Brandon had beaten her when she was released with nothing but the clothes on her back and an apology that meant nothing, she had nowhere to go. Nana Carmen was already gone. The woman who had raised her since she was 5 years old, who had taught her everything about healing and herbs and the strength of a loving heart, had suffered a stroke the moment she learned what happened to Elena in that prison. She died 3 days before Elena's release. And Brandon? Brandon was free. Brandon had a new wife now. Brandon was living in a beautiful house, while Elena slept under bridges and fought off men who tried to drag her into vans with promises of work. She had nothing left. No family, no home, no future, no reason to keep breathing. Elena climbed onto the bridge railing, her legs shaking as she balanced on the narrow strip of metal. The wind grew stronger, pushing at her back as if eager to help her fall. Just one more step, she thought. One more step and it will all be over. She closed her eyes. She leaned forward. Her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. She meant to ignore it. Who would call at 2 a.m? Who would even remember she existed? But it kept vibrating, relentless, stubborn, like a hand reaching out to pull her back from the edge. Finally, almost mechanically, she pulled it out and looked at the screen. An email notification from a law office in Santa Fe. Ari, estate of Carmen Martinez. You are requested to collect inherited items at your earliest convenience. Nana Carmen. Even in death, the old woman was still reaching for her. Elena stepped down from the railing. Her legs gave out, and she crumpled onto the cold concrete of the bridge, sobbing so hard she could not breathe. 3 days later, she stood in the law office, signing papers with trembling hands. The lawyer handed her a small wooden box. Inside was an old leather-bound notebook, its yellowed pages filled with handwritten notes. A photograph of 2 people, a young man and woman in white lab coats, standing in front of a building with a laboratory sign. Elena did not recognize them. And a letter, in Nana Carmen's shaky handwriting. Mija, by the time you read this, I will no longer be with you. There are things I have hidden from you for 20 years to protect you. But now you are strong enough to know the truth. Your parents did not die in a car accident. There are things you need to know. There are people you need to find. Find those who need you most. Use these hands, this heart, to heal them. And Mija, live. Promise me you will live. I love you forever. Nana Carmen Elena stared at the letter. Then at the photograph. Then back at the letter. Her parents did not die in an accident. Then how did they die? Who were these people in the photo? What had Nana Carmen been hiding all these years? The questions spun through her mind like a hurricane. But beneath the confusion, beneath the grief, something else sparked to life. Purpose. For the first time in months, Elena Vasquez had a reason to keep breathing. She did not know that letter would lead her to the mansion of a Mafia boss, a baby gasping for life, and the bloody secret behind her parents' death. The memories came flooding back as Elena sat in her motel room that night, clutching Nana Carmen's letter to her chest. To understand where she was going, she had to remember where she had been, and where she had been was hell. Elena was 5 years old when her childhood ended. She remembered hiding inside the hallway closet, knees pulled to her chest, tiny hands clamped over her ears. Through the slats of the closet door, she could see shadows moving, strange men in her house, men who did not belong there. Her parents were screaming, her mother's voice high and terrified, her father shouting words Elena did not understand. Something about research, something about never giving them anything, then a sound like thunder, once, twice, then silence. Elena stayed in that closet for hours, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. When the police finally came, they found her curled in the darkness, her pajamas soaked with her own urine, her eyes wide and empty. Car accident, they told her later. Your parents died in a car accident. But Elena remembered the strangers. She remembered the thunder sounds. She remembered the silence that followed. No one believed a 5-year-old. Nana Carmen appeared 3 days later, a woman Elena had never met, who claimed to be her grandmother's oldest friend. She took Elena away from California, changed her last name from Reyes to Vasquez, and moved her to a small town in New Mexico, where no one knew their faces. We're safe now, mija, Nana Carmen would whisper every night. No one will find us here. Elena never understood what they were hiding from. She only knew that her parents were gone, and the old woman with gentle hands and healing herbs was all she had left. For 13 years, life was almost normal, almost peaceful. Then Elena turned 18 and met Brandon Hayes. He was beautiful, golden hair, blue eyes, a smile that made her heart flutter. He said all the right things. He made her feel special, chosen, loved. Your grandmother is too controlling, Brandon whispered in her ear after 6 months of dating. She doesn't want you to be happy. She wants to keep you trapped. Elena believed him. She was 18 and desperate to be loved by someone who was not obligated to love her. She moved in with Brandon. She stopped visiting Nana Carmen. She stopped answering calls. The first slap came 3 months later. Brandon apologized with tears in his eyes, promised it would never happen again. It happened again, and again, and again. By the time Elena was 22, she had learned to walk on eggshells. She learned which words triggered his rage, which expressions made his fists clench. She learned to cook his meals exactly the way he liked them, to clean the house until it sparkled, to never ever contradict him. The slaps became punches. The punches became kicks. Brandon burned her arms with cigarettes when dinner was cold. He locked her in the bedroom closet for 2 days when she forgot to buy his favorite beer. No one else will ever love you, he told her every night. You're worthless. You're nothing. Without me, you would be dead in a ditch. Elena believed him. After 4 years of isolation, she had forgotten what kindness felt like. Then she got pregnant. Twin boys, Lucas and Leo. Elena saw them on the ultrasound screen, 2 tiny heartbeats, 2 perfect miracles growing inside her. For the first time in years, she felt hope. Surely Brandon would change now. Surely he would stop hitting her once he became a father. She was wrong. 7 months into her pregnancy, Elena made rice for dinner. The rice was cold by the time Brandon came home from the bar, drunk and furious about something she would never understand. You stupid, worthless whore, he screamed. You can't even keep food warm. He kicked her in the stomach. Elena fell. She felt something tear inside her. She felt the warm rush of blood between her legs. She remembered the ambulance lights, the emergency room, the doctor's face pale and sorry and helpless. I'm so sorry. Both babies. They didn't make it. Lucas and Leo, her sons, dead before they ever saw sunlight. The doctor said more words. Something about internal damage, something about scar tissue, something about how she would probably never carry a child again. Elena did not hear any of it. She was drowning in a grief so deep it had no bottom. But Brandon was not finished destroying her. She did it on purpose, he told the police. She killed my sons. She's crazy. She threatened to hurt them. Elena had no lawyer, no money, no family who would answer her calls. Brandon's expensive attorney painted her as an unstable woman, a danger to herself and others. 8 months in county jail, waiting for trial. 8 months of concrete and metal, and women who had lost everything just like her. 8 months with a guard named Richardson who learned that Elena's cell was in a blind spot of the security cameras. She fought him the first time, and the second. By the third time, she had stopped fighting. She had stopped feeling anything at all. When the neighbor's security footage finally surfaced, showing Brandon kicking Elena in the stomach that night, all charges were dropped. The judge apologized. The prosecutor apologized. Everyone apologized. But no one gave her back Lucas and Leo. No one erased what Richardson had done. No one returned the 8 months stolen from her life. Elena walked out of jail with nothing but the clothes on her back. Nana Carmen had suffered a stroke the day she learned about the assault in prison. She died alone, 3 days before Elena's release. The house in New Mexico was sold to pay medical bills. Elena had no money, no family, no home. She slept under bridges. She begged for food outside gas stations. She learned which dumpsters behind restaurants had edible scraps. One night, a van pulled up beside her. 2 men offered her a job, good money, easy work, just come with them. Elena was desperate enough to say yes. She realized the truth when they locked the van doors, and she saw 3 other women inside, bound and gagged with terror in their eyes. Human trafficking. Elena did not freeze. She did not beg. Something ancient and savage rose up inside her, the survival instinct of someone who had already lost everything. When one of the men leaned close to tie her hands, Elena lunged forward and bit his ear clean off. She spat flesh and blood into his screaming face, kicked open the van's back door, and ran into the night. She ran until her lungs burned. She ran until her legs collapsed. She ran until she found herself on that bridge over the Rio Grande, staring down at the black water. Elena Vasquez had walked through hell and survived. She did not know that hell had been preparing her for something bigger, something that would require every ounce of strength she had forged in the fire of her suffering. In the days that followed, Elena wandered through Nana Carmen's memories like a ghost. She stayed in a cheap motel room, paid for with the small inheritance the old woman had left behind, reading the letter over and over until the words blurred together. Find those who need you most. Use these hands, this heart, to heal them. She did not understand what it meant. She did not know how to find anyone when she could barely find the strength to get out of bed, but she had made a promise. And Elena Vasquez did not break promises, especially not to the dead. One morning, scrolling through her phone without thinking, she saw a job posting that made her stop. Nanny needed for private family in Manhattan, New York. Must have experience with infants and basic medical knowledge. High salary, room and board included. New York. Thousands of miles from New Mexico. Thousands of miles from every painful memory. Thousands of miles from the bridge where she had almost ended everything. Maybe this is where I'm meant to go, Elena whispered to herself, as if speaking to Nana Carmen somewhere above. Maybe this is how I find them, the people who need me most. She pressed apply. 2 weeks later, Elena stood before the Romano estate in Manhattan, her throat dry and her heart pounding against her ribs. She had seen luxury homes before, but never anything like this. The iron gate rose more than 3 meters high, its bars curling into intricate patterns that somehow still felt threatening, like black spears poised to pierce anyone who dared enter uninvited. Security cameras glinted from every angle, tracking her movements with cold mechanical precision. Guards in black suits stood on either side of the entrance, their faces expressionless behind dark sunglasses, even though clouds covered the sky. This is not a house, Elena thought. This is a fortress. She swallowed hard, tightened her grip on the strap of her worn bag, and walked toward the gate. One of the guards stopped her, asked her name and purpose. She answered in a voice far calmer than she felt. He spoke into his radio, waited a few seconds, then nodded and stepped aside. The massive gate opened with a heavy mechanical hiss like the jaws of a monster parting to swallow her whole. A stone driveway wound through gardens trimmed so perfectly they felt unnatural. Not a single fallen leaf, not one blade of grass out of place. Everything controlled, arranged, ruled by an invisible hand with absolute power. A butler in a crisp black uniform led her through the main house past marble floors of black and white, past corridors lined with oil paintings and crystal chandeliers, up a spiral staircase, and finally to a closed wooden door. Mr. Romano is waiting inside, the butler said, then turned and left without another word. Elena drew a deep breath and pushed the door open. The study was dark as a cave. Heavy velvet curtains blocked all light from outside. The only illumination came from a desk lamp, casting a weak golden circle onto a massive oak desk, and sitting behind it, half hidden in shadow, was the man she had come to meet, Dante Romano. He was 37, over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His body looked carved from stone, hard edges and coiled power barely contained beneath an expensive black suit. His storm gray eyes looked through her from across the room, unblinking, unreadable. A faint scar ran along his left cheek, a reminder of violence she did not dare imagine. He did not stand when she entered. He did not offer her a seat. He did not bother with polite greetings. He only watched as if he were dissecting her with his gaze, peeling back every layer, searching for weakness. "Why should I trust you with my daughter?" His voice was low and cold, without a trace of warmth. Elena had prepared for this question. She had rehearsed answers on the flight from New Mexico lines about her experience in pediatric care, her training in infant first aid, her dedication and professionalism. But standing beneath those winter storm eyes, every practice sentence dissolved, and instead, the truth spilled out. "Because I have lost a child," she said, her voice trembling but refusing to break. "I will never let that happen to any other child. Ever." Silence. A long silence that stole the air from the room. Dante Romano went still in his chair. For an instant, just a fraction of a second, the icy mask on his face cracked. Elena saw something flash in those gray eyes. Something like pain. Something like understanding. Something like an old wound being touched. Then the mask returned, as quickly as it had vanished. "You start tomorrow," he said, still cold. But something had shifted beneath the surface. "Don't make me regret it." The butler led Elena to the nursery. The room was painted pale pink, decorated with fairy tale murals and white lace curtains, luxurious down to the smallest detail. Yet something in the air felt cold, missing warmth, missing the love a child's room should hold. Then she saw the baby. Lucia lay in a white crib 6 months old, small and perfect. Her black hair was smooth as silk, just like her father's. Her gray eyes shone like gemstones, just like her father's. But when she looked at Elena, when their gazes met, there was no coldness there, only innocent curiosity. And then a gummy smile bloomed on her tiny lips. Elena stepped closer, her heart melting. She reached out with trembling fingers, terrified that Lucia might vanish like a dream. But Lucia's little hand lifted. Tiny fingers soft as flower petals closed around Elena's finger and squeezed tight. Elena's tears fell onto that tiny hand. She cried for Lucas and Leo, the sons she would never hold. She cried for the long nights she had clutched a pillow instead of a child. She cried for everything that should have been hers, stolen by cruelty. Yet inside those painful tears, something new began to grow, a seed of hope, an invisible thread tying her to this small life, holding her finger as if it never wanted to let go. Elena did not know she had just stepped into the devil's den, but in the tiny hand gripping her finger, she had found a reason to live. It took Elena 3 days to realize she was living in the house of a monster. The first day passed in a haze of wonder and adjustment. She settled into a private room, more luxurious than anywhere she had ever stayed. Soft sheets, thick curtains, a bathroom with marble floors and golden fixtures. She memorized Lucia's schedule. Feeding times at 6 in the morning and every 3 hours after. Naps at 9 and 2. Baths before bed. The household staff were polite but distant. They answered her questions with short, clipped sentences and lowered their heads whenever Dante Romano walked by. Elena assumed they were simply afraid of a demanding employer. She was wrong. On the second night, the truth began to show. Elena woke at 3 in the morning to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, heavy, purposeful, accompanied by low voices. She crept to her door and cracked it open just enough to see. Dante was coming in. Marco Santini walked behind him, along with 2 other guards she did not recognize. Their faces were tight, their movements quick and efficient. Dante's black suit was rumpled. His tie hung loose around his neck. His hair, usually combed perfectly into place, was disheveled, as if he had been in a fight. But what made Elena's blood run cold was not his appearance, it was his shirt. The white fabric of his sleeve, just below the wrist, was stained with dark red streaks, blood. Not his blood, he walked steadily, uninjured, without a mark on him. Someone else's blood. Elena retreated into her room and closed the door without a sound. Her heart pounded like a war drum against her ribs. On the 3rd day, she started to listen. That afternoon, passing Dante's study to fetch fresh towels for Lucia, Elena heard voices inside. She did not mean to eavesdrop. She only slowed her steps, then slowed them more. "The situation in the East Territory has been handled." Marco's voice, tight and businesslike. "Good." Dante's voice cold as winter steel. "Make sure he disappears. No witnesses. I don't want his family asking questions." "Understood, boss." "And the shipment?" "Arrives at the port Thursday night. We've paid off the inspectors. FBI won't catch a cent." A pause. Then Dante spoke again, his tone dropping even lower. "What about Caruso? Did he pay what he owes?" "He says he needs more time. He's had enough time." The sound of something heavy being set on a desk. "Send someone to remind him. If he can't pay, start with his fingers. 1 for every week he's late. Elena walked faster. Her breath had gone thin and sharp. Her hands trembled as she gripped the towels. Shipment, territory, FBI, disappear, no witnesses, fingers. Oh God, she thought when she reached her room. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, both hands pressed to her mouth. He isn't a businessman. He isn't just wealthy. Dante Romano is a mafia boss. She was living in a criminal empire. The child she cared for belonged to a killer. Every meal she ate, every room she slept in, was paid for with blood money. That night, Elena packed. She shoved clothes into her bag with shaking hands, her mind spinning with a million terrifying possibilities. She had to go, right now, before anyone realized she knew too much, before she became one of the people who disappeared with no witnesses. The escape route ran through the back corridor behind the kitchen, a path she had memorized on her first day, just in case. All she had to do was pass Lucia's room, go down the stairs, slip through the kitchen, and she would be free. Elena lifted her bag. She opened her door and stepped into the dark hallway. Her footsteps were silent on the marble floor. The house was quiet. Everyone was asleep. She reached Lucia's door and paused. The nursery door was cracked open. A weak yellow glow from the nightlight spilled into the corridor. Elena meant to keep walking. She meant to leave and never look back. But something made her stop. Something made her look inside. And what she saw changed everything. Dante Romano stood beside the white crib. Elena froze in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. She pressed herself against the wall, hidden in the shadows of the corridor, watching through the crack in the door. The most powerful mafia boss in New York, the man who ordered fingers cut off, who made people disappear without witnesses, whose shirt had been stained with another man's blood just hours ago, was leaning over his daughter's crib with a tenderness that did not make sense. His large hand, a hand strong enough to crush a man's throat, reached down and stroked Lucia's smooth black hair. His touch was impossibly gentle, as if he were afraid the baby might shatter like glass beneath his fingers. The cold mask Elena had come to know, the stone face, the winter eyes, the predator's stillness had melted away completely in the yellow glow of the nightlight. What remained was something raw, something broken, pain, loneliness, and love, a love so absolute, so fierce, it made Elena's throat tighten. Then Dante spoke. His voice was barely a whisper, rough and trembling, meant only for the sleeping child. "I'm sorry, princess." He paused. His massive shoulders rose and fell with a heavy breath. "I'm sorry you have a monster for a father." The words hung in the air like a confession, like a prayer, like a wound that would never heal. "You deserve better than me," Dante continued, his voice cracking. "You deserve a father who doesn't have blood on his hands. A father who can take you to the park without bodyguards. A father whose enemies won't try to hurt you just to get to him." He bent down and pressed his lips to Lucia's forehead, a kiss so tender it seemed impossible from a man like him. "But I swear to you," he whispered against her skin, "I will burn the entire world before I let anyone touch you. You are the only good thing I have ever done, the only pure thing in my entire life." He straightened but did not leave. He just stood there, watching his daughter sleep, as if this moment, this quiet, peaceful moment, was the only thing that mattered in his blood-soaked existence. Elena stepped back from the door. Her mind was spinning. Her heart was pounding. Everything she thought she knew was collapsing around her. Monsters don't love like that. Monsters don't stroke their children's hair with trembling hands. Monsters don't apologize to sleeping babies for the sins they have committed. She thought of Brandon, a man the world saw as normal, respectable, charming, a man who had smiled at neighbors while beating her behind closed doors, a man who had killed their sons without a shred of remorse. Brandon was the real monster. He wore the mask of humanity while hiding a demon inside. But Dante Romano, the killer, the crime lord, the man everyone feared, was standing in a nursery, crying over his daughter, begging forgiveness from a child who would never remember this moment. Elena walked back to her room. She set her bag down on the floor. She did not unpack, not yet, but she did not leave either. That night, Elena saw the human behind the monster. She did not know that her decision to stay would change her entire life. After that night, Elena stayed. She unpacked her bag the next morning and told herself it was for Lucia, only for Lucia. But something else had changed inside her, something she could not name. On the fourth day, Elena noticed something strange. She was sitting beside Lucia's crib during the afternoon nap, watching the baby sleep. The room was quiet, peaceful, filled with soft afternoon light, filtering through the white lace curtains. Then Lucia's chest stopped moving. Elena bolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. She reached for the baby, but before her fingers touched Lucia's face, the tiny chest rose again. A A small breath. Then another. 3 seconds. The pause had lasted only 3 seconds. Elena told herself she had imagined it. Babies breathe irregularly sometimes. It was nothing. But she started watching more closely. On the 5th day, it happened twice. Once during the morning nap 4 seconds without breath. Once at night 5 seconds. Elena began keeping notes in a small journal. Times, durations, frequency. On the 6th day, the pauses stretched longer. 6 seconds, 7 seconds. Each time, Elena held her own breath, waiting, praying, until Lucia's chest finally moved again. Something was wrong. She was certain of it now. That evening, she found Dr. Pierce during his routine visit to check on the baby. The baby has breathing problems when she sleeps, Elena said, keeping her voice calm despite the fear clawing at her chest. She stops breathing for several seconds at a time. It's happening more often. Doctor? Pierce gave her a small, patronizing smile and patted her shoulder as if soothing an anxious child. That's perfectly normal in infants, he said. Periodic breathing. Nothing to worry about. You're overthinking it. Elena did not believe him, but she was just the nanny. Who would listen to her? That night, she went to Dante. He was in his study, reviewing documents with Marco. When Elena knocked and entered, both men looked up with expressions that made clear she was interrupting something important. I'm worried about Lucia, Elena said. She stops breathing when she sleeps. I think something is wrong. Dante's gray eyes flickered with something concern, perhaps, but then the coldness returned. Dr. Pierce examined her yesterday. He said she's fine. His voice carried the finality of a closed door. Know your place. Elena swallowed the hurt and left without another word. Who was she to challenge a doctor and her employer? She was just a nanny hired less than a week ago, with no medical degree and no standing in this house. But her intuition, the instinct Nana Carmen had sharpened over 20 years of teaching her about healing, was screaming that something was terribly wrong. On the 7th night, Elena did not sleep. She pulled a chair beside Lucia's crib and sat there in the darkness, watching every rise and fall of the baby's chest. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, but she refused to close them. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, past 1, past 2. At exactly 2:47 in the morning, Elena noticed the silence. Not the peaceful silence of a sleeping house. A dead silence. She looked at Lucia. The baby's chest was not moving. Her tiny lips were turning from pink to blue, to purple. Elena waited for the breath to come. 1 second, 2, 3, 5, 10. It did not come. This time, Lucia was not going to start breathing again on her own. Everything Elena had feared was becoming real, and everything she had hoped for was about to begin. The hospital room was cold and sterile, painted in shades of white that seemed to drain all warmth from the air. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm, their green lines tracing the fragile heartbeat of the baby lying amid tubes and wires. 6 hours until surgery, 6 hours that stretched like an eternity. Elena sat on a hard plastic chair beside Lucia's bed, her hand wrapped gently around the baby's tiny fingers. She had not slept. She had not eaten. She had not moved from this spot since they arrived. Softly, she began to sing. The melody was ancient, a Spanish lullaby Nana Carmen used to sing to her every night when she was small, a song about stars keeping watch over a sleeping child, a song about angels sheltering the innocent, a song about love that walks through darkness and never turns back. Her voice trembled. It broke on the higher notes, but she did not stop, because this was all she could do. This was the only way she knew to fight death with love, with hope, with the healing power of a grandmother's wisdom passed down through generations. The door opened quietly. Elena looked up and saw Dante Romano step inside. He was still wearing the same black suit from hours earlier, now wrinkled and disheveled. His tie was gone. His shirt collar hung open. His black hair, usually combed perfectly into place, was a mess, as if he had dragged his hands through it 100 times. But it was his eyes that made Elena's heart clench. Red-rimmed, bloodshot, shadowed with exhaustion and something deeper, a fear so raw it stripped away every layer of the cold, powerful man she had come to know. You haven't slept, he said. It was not a question. Neither have you, Elena replied without looking away from Lucia. Silence stretched between them. But it was not uncomfortable, not sharp, the way it had been before. It was simply two exhausted people, two shattered souls, keeping vigil over a small life balanced on the edge between living and dying. Dante pulled up a chair and sat across from Elena on the other side of Lucia's bed. He looked at his daughter, the wires, the monitors, the tube helping her breathe, and his stone face crumbled. Vanessa left when Lucia was 2 months old, he said suddenly. his voice flat, as if he were telling someone else's story. She said the baby was inconvenient for her lifestyle. Said she didn't sign up to be tied down by a crying infant. Elena said nothing. She only listened, because she understood this was what he needed. Not comfort, not judgment, just someone willing to hold the truth. I thought I could give Lucia everything. Dante continued, still staring at the baby. Money, security, the best of everything. But I can't give her a mother. She has you, Elena said quietly. That's more than some children ever get. Dante looked at her. The familiar sharpness flickered in his gaze, but this time there was something else beneath it. A crack in the armor, a spark of genuine curiosity. You said you lost a child, he said. What happened? The question was a blade pushed straight into a wound that had never truly healed. Elena could refuse. She could say it was private. Who was he to demand her pain? But he was also a father sitting here at 3 a.m, terrified of losing his daughter. His eyes held the same fear she had carried for years. My husband, Elena began, her voice shaking slightly. Brandon. He beat me for 4 years. She paused, drew a deep breath. He burned me with cigarettes when I made mistakes, locked me in closets when I talked back. I thought having children would change him. Her eyes dropped to Lucia's tiny hand in hers. I was 7 months pregnant with twin boys, Lucas and Leo. One night, he came home drunk. The rice was cold. Her voice cracked. He kicked me in the stomach. My sons died inside me. The doctor said I might never carry a child again. Silence, heavy and suffocating. Then he blamed me for their deaths. Said I killed them on purpose. I spent 8 months in prison waiting for trial. Elena's jaw tightened. A guard there. He learned my cell was in a camera blind spot. She did not need to say more. The horror of understanding crossed Dante's face. When I finally got out, Nana Carmen, the woman who raised me, was already dead. I had no home, no money. I lived under bridges. I almost got trafficked. She looked up, meeting his gray eyes directly. I stood on a bridge over the Rio Grande at 2 a.m, ready to jump. The only reason I'm still alive is because Nana Carmen's lawyer sent me an email about her will, that exact moment. Dante's face had transformed completely. The coldness was gone. The blankness was gone. In its place was a dark, primal rage boiling beneath the surface like a volcano about to erupt. His gray eyes had turned storm black. His jaw clenched so tight the tendons stood out like ropes. His hands curled into fists, knuckles white. If I find him, Dante said, his voice icy and full of promised death, I will kill him. Elena looked at him. And strangely, she was not afraid. She knew he meant it. She knew he could do it. But instead of terror, something warm spread through her chest. How long had it been since anyone was angry on her behalf? How long since anyone wanted to protect her? He's not worth your time, she said softly. Or your soul. Dante stared at her, his expression crowded with emotions she could not fully read. Then he did something she did not expect. He reached across the bed and took her hand. Not rough, not demanding, just gentle, warm like a promise that needed no words. You survived hell, he said, his voice dropping lower. That takes more strength than anything I have ever done. They sat there, hand in hand, watching over Lucia as the hours crawled by. They did not speak again. They did not need to. When the first pale light of dawn crept through the edge of the curtain, staining the cold white room with gold, neither of them had let go. In that sterile hospital room, 2 broken souls began finding their way toward each other. At 8 a.m, the surgical team wheeled Lucia through the double doors and into the operating room. Elena caught one last glimpse of the baby's face, peaceful, unknowing, so small among the white sheets and sterile equipment before the doors swung shut with a heavy finality. Then began the longest 4 hours of her life. The waiting room was cold and empty. White walls, gray chairs, a television mounted in the corner playing news that no one watched. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air like a ghost. Dante paced, back and forth, back and forth. His expensive shoes clicked against the linoleum floor in a relentless rhythm. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. His jaw was tight enough to shatter stone. He looked like a caged predator, dangerous, desperate, ready to tear apart anyone who brought him bad news. Marco stood by the door, silent and watchful. He had seen his boss face down rival crime lords, survive assassination attempts, and order executions without blinking. But he had never seen Dante Romano like this, never seen the fear that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. 1 hour passed, then 2. Dante stopped by the window, staring out at the city below without seeing it. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, haunted, stripped of every layer of power and control. And then, for the first time in 20 years, Dante Romano prayed. He had abandoned God the night his mother died, the night his stepfather Frank beat her so hard she fell and never got up again. Dante had been 12 years old, hiding in a closet, listening to his mother's screams fade into silence. Where was God that night? Where was mercy? Where was justice? Nowhere. So, Dante had built his own justice, his own power, his own kingdom of blood and money where he answered to no one. But today, standing in this sterile waiting room while his daughter's tiny body lay open on an operating table, all that power meant nothing. "Please," he whispered to the empty air, his voice cracking. "Please, I'll give anything. Just let her live." Across the room, Elena sat motionless in a plastic chair. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. Her eyes were closed. Her lips moved silently, forming words in Spanish prayers Nana Carmen had taught her as a child. Prayers for healing, prayers for protection, prayers for miracles. She did not know if anyone was listening, but she prayed anyway, because it was all she could do. 3 hours, 3.5. The double doors finally opened. Dr. Pierce stepped out, still wearing his surgical cap and gown. His face was tired but calm. Dante froze mid-step. Elena rose to her feet, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Pierce said. "The diaphragm pacemaker is functioning perfectly. Lucia is stable." For a moment, no one moved. Then Dante's legs gave out. He collapsed into the nearest chair, his whole body folding in on itself. His hands came up to cover his face, and a sound escaped him, a raw, broken sound like the groan of a wounded animal finally released from a trap. He was crying. The most powerful man in New York's underworld was sobbing in a hospital waiting room, his shoulders shaking, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Elena felt tears streaming down her own cheeks, but she was smiling through the tears, through the exhaustion, through the overwhelming relief that flooded every cell of her body. Lucia was alive. The baby with the curse of Ondine would breathe through the night. She would grow up. She would live. Dante lifted his head. His gray eyes, red-rimmed and wet, found Elena across the room. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse and shattered, "for everything." In that moment, every wall between them crumbled, every barrier of status, of suspicion, of fear gone. They were just two people who had fought together through the darkest night and emerged into the dawn. Lucia was saved, but the real danger had not yet begun. The relief lasted less than 5 minutes. Elena was still wiping tears from her cheeks when the waiting room door burst open. Marco Santini rushed in, and the look on his face made Elena's blood turn to ice. The head of security was always composed, always controlled. In the week Elena had known him, she had never seen him show any emotion beyond cold professionalism. But now his face was pale as paper. His eyes were wide with something that looked terrifyingly like panic. "Boss," Marco said, his voice tight. "We have a problem." He thrust his phone toward Dante. Dante took it, his brow furrowing. Elena watched his face as he looked at the screen, watched the relief drain away, watched the softness harden back into stone, watched something dark and murderous rise from the depths of his gray eyes. "When was this taken?" Dante's voice was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before an explosion. "Less than 10 minutes ago," Marco said. "It was sent to your private number, the one only 12 people in the world know." Elena stepped closer, her curiosity overriding her caution. She glanced at the phone screen and felt her stomach drop. It was a photograph of Lucia. The baby lay in the recovery room, surrounded by monitors and tubes, sleeping peacefully after her surgery. The image had been taken through the glass window of the room from inside the hospital. Someone had been standing right there, watching, while they all sat in the waiting room believing everything was finally safe. Below the photo was a message. "Beautiful daughter. Would be a shame if something happened to her." Dante's hand tightened around the phone. His knuckles went white. The tendons in his forearms stood out like steel cables. Then he hurled the phone against the wall. It shattered into 100 pieces, plastic and glass scattering across the linoleum floor like broken teeth. "Volkov!" The name tore from Dante's throat like a curse, like a declaration of war. Elena had never heard him raise his voice before. The sound was terrifying, primal, the roar of a beast whose cub had been threatened. Dante spun toward Marco, every trace of the grieving father gone. In his place stood the crime lord, the killer, the man who ruled New York's underworld through fear and blood. "Lock down the hospital. Every exit, every stairwell. No one leaves until we find whoever took that photo." His voice was cold as winter steel. "Get 20 men here now. I want every camera checked, every face identified. And Marco, he grabbed his security chief by the collar, pulling him close. If Volkov's people get within 100 feet of my daughter again, I will hold you personally responsible. Marco nodded once, then disappeared through the door, already barking orders into his radio. Dante turned to Elena. His eyes were blazing not with the warmth she had seen during their night of shared secrets, but with something dangerous, something lethal. You should leave, he said. This is not your fight. These people, they don't play by any rules. They will kill anyone who gets in their way. Elena looked through the window into the recovery room. Lucia lay there, so small, so innocent, completely unaware that somewhere in this building, someone was plotting to hurt her. She thought of Lucas and Leo, the sons she could not save. The babies who died because she was too weak, too trapped, too helpless to protect them. Never again. I'm not going anywhere, Elena said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. I don't care who's coming. I don't care how dangerous they are. That baby needs me, and I'm staying. Dante stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, then something deeper, something that looked almost like respect. You want to know the truth? He asked quietly. Fine. But once you know, there is no going back. Dante led Elena to a small private room at the end of the corridor. It was meant for families receiving bad news, soundproof walls, no windows, 2 chairs facing each other across a narrow space. He closed the door and stood with his back against it, as if blocking any chance of escape. You want to know what kind of man you're staying for? He said. It was not a question. Fine. I'll tell you everything. Then you can decide if you still want to be here. Elena sat down in one of the chairs. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced beneath her ribs. Dante did not sit. He paced slowly, his gray eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the walls. I was born in Brooklyn, he began. Not the Brooklyn you see in magazines today, all hipster cafes and $1,000,000 condos. The Brooklyn of the 1980s. Tenement buildings. Drug dealers on every corner. The kind of place where rats outnumbered people. He paused, his jaw tightening. My mother was beautiful, too beautiful for her own good. She fell in love with a man who promised her the world, then disappeared before I was born, left her pregnant and alone in that hellhole. Elena said nothing. She only listened, the way she had learned to listen during her years with Nana Carmen, with her whole heart open. Then she met Frank. Dante's voice turned cold, sharp as a blade. My stepfather, a drunk with fists like hammers and a temper that exploded every time he touched a bottle. He touched the faint scar on his left cheek, the one Elena had noticed on her first day at the mansion. I was 10 years old when he gave me this. Hit me with a broken bottle because I spilled his beer. My mother begged him to stop. He hit her instead. The room felt smaller, darker, as if the walls were closing in around the weight of his words. Every night was the same. He would drink. He would rage. My mother and I would try to stay invisible, try not to set him off. Sometimes it worked. Most times it didn't. Dante stopped pacing. His hands curled into fists at his sides. When I was 12, he went too far. Beat my mother so hard she fell and hit her head on the corner of the kitchen table. His voice dropped to a whisper. She died right there on the floor. I was hiding in the closet, listening to her scream until she stopped. Elena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She knew that closet. She knew that helpless terror. She had hidden in a closet too, listening to her own parents' screams fade into silence. I ran that night, Dante continued. 12 years old, no money, no family, no future. I lived on the streets, stole food to survive, fought anyone who tried to take what little I had. He turned to face her, his gray eyes hard as granite. In my world, you are either the predator or the prey. I decided very young that I would never be prey again. He began pacing once more, slower now. I built the Romano Empire from nothing, started as a runner for a local gang, worked my way up. By the time I was 25, I controlled half of Manhattan's underground. By 30, I owned it all. He stopped and looked directly at Elena. I have killed people, he said flatly. Some of them deserved it. Some of them probably did not. I am not a good man. I have never pretended to be. Elena held his gaze without flinching. She had known monsters before. Brandon had taught her what evil looked like when it wore a charming smile. Dante was different. Dante was darkness that knew itself, that did not hide behind masks of normalcy. Nikolai Volkov, Dante continued, is the head of the Russian Mafia. He controls most of the East Coast drugs, human trafficking, money laundering. Everything vile that crawls through this city, he has his fingers in it. His voice hardened further. He has wanted my territory for years, but he could never find a weakness to exploit. Dante's eyes flickered toward the door, toward the recovery room where Lucia slept. Now he has found one. Silence filled the room. Elena rose from her chair. She stepped closer to Dante until barely a foot separated them. "Will you protect her?" she asked quietly. "Truly protect her? With your life?" Dante's gray eyes burned into hers. "I will burn the entire world to keep her safe." Elena nodded slowly. She believed him. Every word. "Then I'm staying," she said. "For Lucia, not for you." Something flickered across Dante's face, surprise. Then something deeper. Something that looked almost like admiration. "You are either the bravest woman I have ever met," he said, "or the most foolish." Elena allowed herself a small smile, the first since this nightmare began. Maybe both. She had learned the truth. Now she had to live with it. 3 days after the surgery, Lucia came home. The Romano mansion had transformed into a fortress. Security had doubled. Guards patrolled every corridor, every entrance, every shadow. Cameras covered every angle. Motion sensors lined the perimeter. No one entered or left without Marco's personal approval. But Elena could not shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. She sat in the nursery at 2 a.m, a book open in her lap that she had not read a single page of. Lucia slept peacefully in her crib, the soft hum of the diaphragm pacemaker barely audible beneath the sound of her breathing. The mansion was quiet, too quiet. Elena had grown up in Nana Carmen's house, where the desert wind whispered secrets and the coyotes sang to the moon. She had learned to listen to silence, to hear what it was hiding. Tonight, the silence felt wrong, heavy, pregnant with violence. She closed her book and stood, moving to the window. Outside, the garden lay still beneath the moonlight. The guards paced their usual routes. Nothing seemed out of place. And yet, the lights went out. Every lamp, every screen, every emergency light. The entire mansion plunged into absolute darkness in a single heartbeat. This was not a power failure. The backup generators should have kicked in within seconds. They did not. This was intentional. Then came the gunfire. It erupted from everywhere at once, a thunderstorm of bullets shattering the night. Glass exploded inward. Walls splintered. Screams pierced the air, mixing with the rapid crack of automatic weapons. Elena did not freeze. She did not panic. She moved. In 3 strides, she crossed the nursery and scooped Lucia from the crib. The baby woke instantly, her tiny body jerking with terror, her mouth opening in a wail that was swallowed by the chaos outside. Elena pressed Lucia against her chest, one hand cradling the baby's head, shielding her from whatever was coming. The nursery door burst open. Elena's heart stopped, but it was Marco, his gun drawn, his face hard as iron in the dim glow of muzzle flashes from somewhere down the hall. "Safe room!" he shouted over the gunfire. "Now! Move!" Elena ran. The corridor was a nightmare. Smoke drifted through the darkness. Red emergency lights flickered on and off, casting everything in a hellish strobe. Somewhere ahead, men were shouting in Russian harsh, guttural commands that needed no translation. Marco moved in front of her, his weapon raised, clearing the path. 2 guards flanked them, their bodies forming a human shield around Elena and the baby. A bullet whistled past Elena's ear and buried itself in the wall inches from her face. Plaster exploded, stinging her cheek with tiny fragments. She did not stop. She could not stop. Lucia screamed in her arms, terrified by the noise and chaos. Elena hunched her body around the baby, making herself as small as possible while still running. Another corner, another corridor. The guard in front of her, a young man she had seen at the gate, barely older than herself, suddenly jerked backward. His body twisted mid-step. His gun clattered to the floor. He fell at Elena's feet, his eyes staring up at the ceiling, already empty. A red flower bloomed across his chest, spreading fast, soaking into the white marble beneath him. Blood splattered onto Elena's clothes, onto her hands, onto Lucia's blanket. She did not stop. Marco grabbed her arm and pulled her forward, stepping over the body without breaking stride. "Keep moving," he barked. "We're almost there." Somewhere behind them, Elena heard Dante's voice, a roar that cut through the gunfire like a blade. "This is my house, my territory, my daughter." She caught a glimpse of him as they rounded a corner. He moved through the darkness like a ghost made of shadows and fury. His gun barked twice, 2 precise shots, and 2 attackers dropped. He was not hiding. He was not retreating. He was hunting. But Elena could not watch. Marco was dragging her forward, toward a reinforced door at the end of the corridor. He slapped a keycard against the scanner. A green light blinked. The steel door hissed open. Marco shoved Elena inside. The room beyond was small, windowless, lined with concrete walls thick enough to stop a tank. Emergency lights glowed softly from the ceiling. "Stay here," Marco ordered. "Do not open this door for anyone except me or the boss. Anyone. Do you understand?" Elena nodded, clutching Lucia to her chest. Marco stepped back. The steel door swung shut with a heavy clang, the sound of a coffin lid closing. Then silence. Elena stood in the center of the safe room, her heart pounding, her breath ragged. Lucia whimpered against her chest, exhausted from crying. Outside, muffled by 15 inches of reinforced steel, the battle continued. Gunshots, explosions, screams, but in here, it was quiet, safe, or so she thought. A soft scratching sound came from above. Elena looked up at the ventilation grate in the ceiling, and her blood turned to ice. Hell was burning outside the steel door, but Elena did not know the real hell was inside the safe room with her. Elena crouched in the corner of the safe room, her back pressed against the cold concrete wall. Lucia was cradled against her chest, the baby's cries reduced to exhausted whimpers. Outside, the gunfire was growing quieter, fewer shots, longer pauses between them. Maybe it was ending. Maybe they had won. Then she heard the scratching. It came from above, a soft, rhythmic scraping sound from the ventilation grate in the ceiling. Metal against metal, something moving through the ductwork. Elena's blood turned to ice. The scraping grew louder, closer, then stopped directly above her head. The grate exploded downward. A massive figure dropped from the ceiling, landing in a crouch with the fluid grace of a predator. He rose to his full height easily, over 6 feet, shoulders wide as a doorway, dressed entirely in black tactical gear. A mask covered the lower half of his face. Only his eyes were visible, cold eyes, dead eyes. The eyes of a snake sizing up its prey. In his hand was a pistol fitted with a long silencer, already aimed at Elena's head. "The boss wants the baby," he said in accented English. Russian. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Give her to me, and I'll make your death quick." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Her arms tightened around Lucia. Every instinct screamed at her to cower, to beg, to surrender. And in that moment, she remembered Brandon's fists, the taste of blood in her mouth, the helplessness of lying on the floor while someone stronger hurt her again and again. She remembered the prison cell, the guard's hands, the way she had stopped fighting because fighting never saved her. She remembered standing on that bridge, ready to die because she had convinced herself she was weak, worthless, a victim. No, never again. After escaping the trafficking van, Elena had made herself a promise. She had found a women's shelter that offered self-defense classes. She had trained every day for months, learning to turn fear into fuel, to transform helplessness into power. She was not the same broken woman who had stood on that bridge. Elena moved. In one fluid motion, she placed Lucia behind the metal filing cabinet in the corner, the most protected spot in the room. Then she spun back to face the assassin. Her hand closed around the desk lamp on the small table beside her. She hurled it at his face with all her strength. The assassin was fast, but not fast enough. The lamp struck his forehead, shattering on impact. He staggered back, his aim disrupted. The silenced pistol coughed. The bullet buried itself in the wall inches from Elena's head. She did not freeze. She charged. Her knee drove into his kneecap, a move designed to buckle even the largest opponent. He grunted in pain, his leg folding. Before he could recover, her elbow smashed into his nose. Blood sprayed from beneath his mask. The gun clattered to the floor. But he did not fall. With a snarl of rage, he swung his massive fist at her head. Elena ducked. But not completely. The blow glanced off her shoulder, sending lightning bolts of pain down her arm. She stumbled back. He advanced, murder in his snake eyes. Then she saw it, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall behind her. Elena grabbed it, tore it free, and swung with every ounce of strength she possessed, with the fury of every night Brandon had beaten her, with the grief of every child she had lost, with the rage of a woman who had survived hell and refused to be a victim ever again. The metal cylinder connected with his temple. The sound was sickening, a wet crack that echoed through the concrete room. The assassin's eyes went wide. His body swayed. For one endless second, he stood there like a tree waiting to fall. Then he collapsed. He hit the floor and did not move again. Elena stood over him, chest heaving, the fire extinguisher still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Blood dripped from its dented surface. Her clothes were soaked with sweat and gore. Her hair had torn free from its tie, hanging wild around her face. The steel door burst open. Dante Romano rushed in, gun raised, ready to kill whoever threatened his daughter. Marco was right behind him, weapon sweeping the room. They both stopped dead. Elena stood in the center of the safe room, battered, bloodied, trembling with adrenaline. At her feet lay the motionless body of an assassin twice her size. In the corner behind her, Lucia was crying but alive, untouched, safe. Dante stared. His gray eyes moved from the body to the fire extinguisher to Elena's face. "You." His voice was hoarse with disbelief. "You took him down?" Elena met his gaze. Her dark eyes burned with something fierce, something unbreakable. "I told you," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "No one touches that baby." Dante looked at her as he had never looked at anyone before. Not as a servant, not as someone to protect, not as a fragile thing that might shatter. He looked at her as a warrior, an equal. The battle was over. 8 attackers lay dead throughout the mansion. 2 had been captured alive, dragged to the basement for questioning that Elena did not want to imagine. 4 of Dante's guards had fallen, their bodies covered with white sheets and carried away in silence. And Dante himself had taken a bullet. It had torn through the muscle of his left shoulder, a clean entry and exit wound that bled heavily but missed anything vital. He had refused to go to a hospital. Too many questions, too many records. So at 4 a.m, in his bedroom lit only by candles because the power had not yet been restored, Elena found herself playing surgeon. The first aid kit lay open on the bed beside her. Dante sat shirtless on the edge of the mattress. His jaw clenched against the pain as she worked. Blood had dried in streaks down his arm and chest, dark against his olive skin. Elena cleaned the wound with antiseptic, her hands steady despite everything she had been through tonight. She had learned basic medical care from Nana Carmen, how to stitch cuts, how to set bones, how to heal with herbs and patience when doctors were too far away. "You're lucky," she said quietly, wrapping the bandage around his shoulder. 1 centimeter to the left, and it would have hit the artery. You'd have bled out before anyone could help you. Dante watched her work. His gray eyes followed her hands, then lifted to her face. "Or maybe someone is watching over me," he said. His voice was low, rough with exhaustion, and something else she could not name. He was looking at her when he said it. Only at her. Elena tied off the bandage and sat back. Her own body ached, bruises forming where the assassin had struck her, muscles screaming from the fight, but she did not move away. "If I had lost Lucia tonight..." Dante's voice trailed off. He stared at his hands that had killed men just hours ago. "She's the only reason I have to live." Elena said nothing. She waited. "I built this empire," he continued, his voice hollow. "I killed for it. I damned my soul for it. And for what? So my daughter can grow up knowing her father is a monster? Lucia doesn't know what you are," Elena said softly. "She only knows that you love her. That's all that matters to a child." Dante looked at her, really looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Why did you stay?" he asked. The question was barely a whisper. "After everything you learned about me. After tonight. Why are you still here?" Elena held his gaze. She thought about all the reasons she could give. Lucia needed her. She had nowhere else to go. She was bound by some sense of duty, but those were not the truth. "Because I see the human behind the monster," she said. "And he deserves to be saved." Something broke in Dante's eyes. Something that had been locked away for years, decades, finally cracked open. He reached out and took her hand. Not roughly, not demanding, just gentle and warm, like a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. Then he pulled her closer. Their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, questioning, like two people afraid of breaking something fragile. Then it deepened. Dante's uninjured hand came up to cup her face, and Elena leaned into him, into the warmth and the desperation and the raw need that poured from both of them. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of 2 drowning souls who had finally found each other in the dark water. They did not make love that night. There were too many wounds, physical and otherwise, that needed time to heal. Instead, Elena lay beside him on the bed, her hand in his, listening to his breathing slow, as exhaustion finally claimed him. In the corner of the room, a small crib had been brought in. Lucia slept inside, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, the soft hum of the pacemaker keeping her alive. 3 people. A crime lord with blood on his hands, a broken woman who had survived hell, a baby with a curse that made her forget how to breathe, a strange, impossible family born in darkness. For the first time in years, Elena felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. 1 week after the attack, the Romano mansion had been restored to its former dark elegance, shattered windows replaced, bullet holes patched and painted over, bloodstains scrubbed from marble floors until no trace remained. But Elena knew the truth that pristine surfaces could hide. 4 men had died in these hallways. Violence had soaked into these walls. No amount of cleaning could wash that away. Security had tripled. New guards patrolled every corner. Additional cameras watched every shadow. Marco had personally inspected every ventilation shaft in the building, welding steel grates over each one. Life continued. Fragile, watchful, but continuing. Elena sat in the nursery, feeding Lucia her afternoon bottle. The baby sucked contentedly, her gray eyes so like her father's fixed on Elena's face with complete trust. The soft hum of the pacemaker was barely audible beneath the quiet sounds of feeding. Elena's phone buzzed on the table beside her. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Probably spam, she thought, returning her attention to Lucia. It buzzed again. A text message. I know the truth about your parents. Meet me. Elena's hand froze. The bottle slipped slightly, and Lucia made a small noise of complaint. She stared at the words until they blurred. Her heart began pounding against her ribs. For 20 years, she had believed her parents died in a car accident. That was what the police said. That was what Nana Carmen told her. That was what she had accepted as truth. But Nana Carmen's letter had said otherwise. Your parents did not die in a car accident. There are things I have hidden from you for 20 years to protect you. Elena had tried not to think about those words. There had been too much else: the job, Lucia, the attack, Dante. She had pushed the mystery aside, telling herself she would deal with it later. Later had apparently found her first. With trembling fingers, she typed a reply. Who are you? The response came within seconds. Someone who has been searching for you for 20 years. This is about how they really died. Elena's breath caught. Another message appeared. Rosa Cafe, Brooklyn. 3 o'clock this afternoon. Come alone. She sat motionless, staring at the screen while Lucia finished her bottle. Her mind raced through possibilities. This could be a trap. Volkov's people, using her past to lure her out. She should tell Dante. She should show him the messages and let his men investigate. But if she told Dante, he would never let her go. He would send Marco instead, or insist on accompanying her with an army of guards. Whoever this person was, they had asked her to come alone. They might disappear if she brought backup, and Elena needed to know. She needed to know what really happened to her parents. She needed to understand why Nana Carmen had lied for 20 years. She needed the truth. At 2:30, Elena slipped out through the service entrance. She wore a plain coat with the hood pulled low over her face, looking nothing like the nanny who lived in the mansion of the most powerful crime lord in New York. She was halfway across the courtyard when she felt eyes on her. Marco stood by the garage, arms crossed, watching her with his sharp security chief gaze. Elena froze, certain he would stop her, drag her back inside, report her escape attempt to Dante. But Marco only looked at her for a long moment. Something passed across his weathered face, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a need he could not deny. Then he nodded. Once, barely perceptible, and he turned away. Elena did not question it. She walked out the service gate and disappeared into the city. Rosa Cafe was a tiny establishment tucked into an alley in Brooklyn, the kind of place where people went when they did not want to be seen. Elena pushed through the door at exactly 3 o'clock, her heart hammering. A woman sat alone at a corner table. She was perhaps 53 years old, with black hair streaked with silver and a face lined by years of worry. She wore simple clothes, nothing expensive, nothing memorable. But her eyes were dark brown, deep and warm and achingly familiar. They were identical to Elena's own. You look exactly like your mother, the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. I am Sofia Vasquez, your mother's older sister. She paused, tears glistening. Your aunt. Elena shook her head, backing away slightly. That's impossible. My mother was an only child. She had no siblings. Sofia reached into her bag and withdrew a worn envelope. From it, she pulled photographs yellowed with age of 2 young girls with matching dark eyes and bright smiles. Birth certificates. Letters in faded ink. That is what they told you, Sofia said quietly. To protect you. Elena looked into those eyes, mirror images of her own, and felt everything she had believed for 20 years begin to crumble. Elena sank into the chair across from Sofia, her legs no longer able to support her. The cafe seemed to shrink around them, the world outside fading to nothing. Tell me everything, she whispered. Sofia took a deep breath, her weathered hands folded on the table between them. Your parents, my sister Maria and her husband Daniel, were not ordinary people. They were brilliant scientists, geneticists. They worked at a research facility in California, studying rare genetic disorders. She paused, her dark eyes glistening with old grief. Their specialty was a condition called congenital central hypoventilation syndrome, CCHS. You might know it by its other name. Elena's blood turned to ice. Ondine's curse. Sophia nodded slowly. The same disease that afflicts the baby you care for. The coincidence was too precise, too impossible. Elena's mind reeled. Your parents dedicated their lives to finding a cure, Sophia continued. Not just treatment, a real cure. Gene therapy that could repair the genetic defect causing the syndrome. One treatment, and children would be healed permanently. No ventilators for life, no surgeries, no pacemakers. Did they succeed? They were close. So close. Sophia's voice trembled. Their research was perhaps 90% complete. They just needed funding for clinical trials, human testing. They were months away from changing the world. She reached into her bag and withdrew a worn leather notebook, the same one Elena had received from Nana Carmen's estate, the one she had barely looked at in her grief and confusion. This contains their research notes, everything they discovered, everything they were killed for. The word hung in the air like smoke. Killed. There is a pharmaceutical company called Helix Pharmaceuticals, Sophia said, her voice hardening, one of the largest medical equipment manufacturers in the world. They make billions of dollars every year selling ventilators, pacemakers, monitoring systems, all the machines that keep children with CCHS alive. Elena began to understand. The horror crept up her spine like ice water. If your parents' cure had succeeded, Helix would have lost everything. No more lifetime customers, no more expensive equipment, no more profit from sick children. Sophia's hands clenched on the table. They approached your parents with an offer. $50 million to buy the research. Not to develop it, to bury it. To ensure it never saw the light of day. And my parents refused, Elena said. It was not a question. Your father told them that the cure belonged to every child suffering from this disease. That science was not for sale to the highest bidder. That he would rather die than let corporate greed condemn thousands of children to a lifetime of machines. Sophia's voice cracked. So Helix made sure he got his wish. She slid a photograph across the table. Elena picked it up with numb fingers. The image showed a man in his 50s, silver hair, cold blue eyes, a face that radiated cruelty even in a still photograph. Nikolai Volkov, Sophia said. 20 years ago, he was already building his criminal empire. Helix needed someone to make a problem disappear. Someone with no conscience and no connections to the legitimate business world. Elena stared at the face. The same face she had seen in briefings at the Romano mansion. The same man who had sent assassins to kill Lucia. The same monster who had threatened everything she now loved. They paid him $50 million, Sophia continued. He staged it as a car accident, made sure there were no survivors, no witnesses, no evidence. But I survived, Elena breathed, because of Carmen. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. My sister called her the night before it happened. Maria knew something was wrong. She had received threats. She begged Carmen to take you somewhere safe, to hide you, to never let anyone connect you to the Vasquez name. She knew they were coming. She knew, and she chose to stay, to try to protect the research, to find a way to expose Helix. She thought she could win. Sophia wiped her eyes. She was wrong. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the photograph. Volkov's cold eyes stared up at her, the eyes of the man who had murdered her parents, orphaned her at 5 years old, set in motion every tragedy that followed. And now he was trying to kill Lucia, the baby with Ondine's curse, the baby Elena loved as if she were her own daughter. The research, Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. It could still work? The scientists I've contacted say it's viable. The foundation is solid. With proper funding and testing, your parents' cure could save thousands of lives. Sophia pushed the leather notebook closer, including Lucia Romano's. The connections exploded in Elena's mind like fireworks. She had been hired as a nanny for a Mafia boss's daughter, a baby who happened to have the exact disease her parents had died trying to cure. That Mafia boss was at war with Nikolai Volkov, the man who had murdered her parents. And in her hands was research that could save not only Lucia, but every child suffering from this curse. This cannot be coincidence, Elena said. Sophia reached across the table and took her hands. It is not coincidence, she said firmly. It is fate. Nana Carmen's letter told you to find those who need you most. And you did. Her grip tightened. You were led to that mansion, to that baby, to that man because this is where you were always meant to be. Elena looked down at the photograph of Volkov, then at the leather notebook containing her parents' legacy, then at her own hands, hands that had saved Lucia's life, Hands that had killed a man to protect her. Nana Carmen's words echoed in her mind. Find those who need you most. Use these hands, this heart, to heal them. She finally understood. Elena returned to the mansion that evening and told Dante everything. They sat in his study, the door locked, the curtains drawn. She spoke for nearly an hour about Sofia, about her parents, about the research that could have saved thousands of children, about Helix Pharmaceuticals and their $50 million contract for murder, and about Nikolai Volkov. Dante listened in absolute silence. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with a fury that seemed to darken the room itself. When Elena finished, he stood and walked to the window. His hands gripped the curtain so tightly his knuckles went white. 20 years, he said, his voice a low growl. He has been right there for 20 years, and I never knew. He turned to face her, and Elena saw something in his expression she had never seen before. Not just anger, not just the cold calculation of a crime lord planning revenge. This was rage, pure, primal, bottomless rage. He stole your family, Dante said, and now he's trying to steal mine. Elena rose from her chair. What are you going to do? Dante's gray eyes locked onto hers. I'm going to end him, and then I'm going to burn Helix to the ground. How? Volkov keeps records of everything insurance against his clients. Somewhere in his compound, there will be evidence of the contract with Helix, proof that they paid him to murder your parents. His jaw tightened. I'll get that proof. I'll send it to every news outlet and federal agency in the country. And then I'll put a bullet in his skull. Elena stepped closer. Why do you believe me? I could be lying. I could be working for him. Dante studied her face for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he reached out and took her hand. Because you could have sold this information to my enemies, he said quietly. You could have used it as leverage against me. Instead, you came straight here and told me everything. His grip tightened. That's not what a liar does. That's what family does. The word hung between them. Family. Together, Elena said. We do this together. You destroy Volkov. I complete my parents' research. We save Lucia and every child like her. Dante nodded once. Together, 2 weeks of preparation followed. Dante gathered intelligence, positioned his men, planned every detail of the assault. Elena worked with Sofia and a team of scientists her aunt had assembled, poring over her parents' research notes. The night before the attack, Dante found Elena in Lucia's nursery. She sat beside the crib, singing softly in Spanish the same lullaby Nana Carmen had taught her. Lucia slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Dante stood in the doorway, watching them. In the soft glow of the nightlight, Elena looked almost ethereal, a guardian angel keeping watch over his daughter. If I don't come back tomorrow, he said quietly, take Lucia and run, far away from here. Give her a normal life. Elena stopped singing. She turned to face him, her dark eyes fierce. You'll come back, she said, because I'm not raising this child alone. Something shifted in Dante's expression. He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. When this is over, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Marry me. Elena's breath caught. She looked into his storm-gray eyes and saw everything. The killer, the father, the broken boy who had never healed, the man who loved with a ferocity that terrified him. Ask me again when you come home, she whispered. I'll give you my answer then. At 4 a.m, 40 of Dante's men descended on Volkov's compound in Red Hook. The building was a converted warehouse, rusted metal walls hiding a fortress of concrete and steel. 30 of Volkov's soldiers waited inside, armed and ready. Dante led the assault personally. He moved through the darkness like death itself, his gun an extension of his arm. Every shot found its target. Every movement was precise, lethal, unstoppable. The battle raged through each floor. Gunfire echoed off concrete walls. Men fell on both sides. 8 of Dante's soldiers went down in the first 15 minutes, loyal men who had followed him for years, now bleeding out on warehouse floors. But Dante did not stop. He could not stop. Not until Volkov was dead. They breached the top floor with explosives. The steel door blew inward, smoke and debris filling the corridor. Dante stepped through the chaos and found himself in Volkov's private office. The Russian sat behind a massive desk, calm as a winter lake. His silver hair was immaculate. His cold blue eyes showed no fear. I've been expecting you, Volkov said, almost pleasantly. Please, sit. Let us talk like civilized men. There's nothing civilized about what I'm going to do to you. Volkov smiled a reptile's smile, devoid of warmth. The girl told you, didn't she? About her parents, He laughed softly. Easiest money I ever made. Two idealistic scientists who thought they could change the world. They didn't even see it coming. Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. Do you want to know the truly amusing part? Volkov leaned forward. Helix has been sitting on that cure for 20 years. They could have saved thousands of children. They could have saved your daughter before she was even born. His smile widened. But where's the profit in healthy children? Something inside Dante snapped. He fired. Volkov dove behind the desk. The office erupted into chaos. They exchanged shots across the room, furniture splintering, glass shattering. Dante took a bullet grazed to his arm but kept moving, kept firing. Then Volkov was on him. The Russian was faster than he looked, decades of violence honed into muscle memory. A knife appeared in his hand, slashing toward Dante's throat. Dante blocked, but the blade found his side, sinking deep into his hip. Pain exploded through him. He grabbed Volkov's wrist, twisted with all his strength. Bones cracked. Volkov screamed. Dante's fist connected with Volkov's face. Once, twice, again and again, until the man's features were unrecognizable. Then he pressed his gun to Volkov's forehead. "This is for Elena's parents," he said, "and for my daughter." The shot echoed through the empty warehouse. Volkov's body slumped to the floor, his blue eyes finally empty. Dante limped to the desk. Through the haze of pain, he found Volkov's laptop still open, files accessible. Years of evidence, contracts with Helix, proof of every crime. He plugged in a drive and began downloading. Then he sent everything to the FBI, to every major newspaper, to anyone who would listen. When it was done, he staggered toward the exit. Dawnlight was bleeding through the warehouse windows. Outside, his surviving men were securing the building. Marco met him at the door. "Boss, you need medical." Dante's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the concrete, blood pooling beneath him, staining the sunrise red. The battle had been won, but the price had not yet been fully paid. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Elena sat in the hospital waiting room, Lucia sleeping in her arms, and prayed to every god she had ever heard of. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness. Coffee grew cold in cups no one remembered to drink. Twice during the surgery, Dante's heart stopped. Twice, the medical team shocked him back to life. Elena did not know this until later, but somehow, in the depths of her soul, she felt each moment his heart went silent. She felt the void, the terror, the desperate clinging to hope. "Please," she whispered into Lucia's soft hair. "Please don't take him. I haven't said yes yet." In the corner of the waiting room, a television played the news on mute. Elena glanced up and froze. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Helix Pharmaceuticals CEO arrested in massive scandal. She reached for the remote and turned up the volume. 20 years of corporate crimes exposed today as federal authorities arrested the entire executive board of Helix Pharmaceuticals. Evidence provided by an anonymous source reveals the company paid for the murder of 2 scientists who had developed a cure they wanted suppressed. The anchor's voice continued, but Elena could barely hear it through her tears. Victims identified as Dr. Daniel Vasquez and Dr. Maria Vasquez, geneticists who were developing a revolutionary treatment for a rare breathing disorder. Pictures flashed on screen. Her parents, young and smiling in their lab coats, the same photograph Nana Carmen had kept hidden for 20 years. "They know," Elena sobbed, clutching Lucia tighter. "Everyone knows now." 3 days later, Dante opened his eyes. The hospital room was quiet. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the curtains. Elena sat beside his bed, her hand wrapped around his, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. "Did we win?" His voice was a ragged whisper. Elena laughed through her tears. "We won. Volkov is dead. Helix is finished. Your daughter is safe." Dante turned his head slowly, wincing at the movement. His gray eyes found hers and held them. "You haven't given me your answer." Elena brought his hand to her lips and kissed his bruised knuckles. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The answer is yes." 3 years later, Dr. Elena Romano stood at a podium before an audience of thousands. The International Medical Conference had invited her to present the culmination of her work, the completion of her parents' research. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the words, "CCHS, Genotherapy. A complete cure today," Elena announced, her voice steady and clear. "I am honored to share that our gene therapy treatment for congenital central hypoventilation syndrome has achieved full regulatory approval. Children born with Ondine's curse can now be completely cured with a single treatment. No more lifetime ventilators. No more surgeries. No more fear." The audience erupted in applause. I want to dedicate this achievement to my parents, Dr. Daniel and Dr. Maria Vasquez, who gave their lives for this dream. To my grandmother Carmen, who taught me that healing begins in the heart. To my husband, who walked through darkness to bring light to our family. And to my daughter Lucia, who showed me that miracles are real. In the wings of the stage, Dante stood holding a 4-year-old girl with black hair and storm-gray eyes. Lucia was healthy now. The gene therapy had cured her completely 6 months ago. No more pacemaker, no more fear of sleep. Just a normal, happy little girl who laughed easily and loved fiercely. Dante himself had changed. The darkness that once surrounded him had lifted. He had dissolved his criminal empire and founded the Romano Children's Foundation, now the largest charity in America dedicated to children with rare diseases. The monster had found his redemption. A reporter raised her hand. Dr. Romano, what are your plans for the future? Elena glanced toward the wings, where Dante stood with Lucia. A secret smile crossed her lips. Her hand moved almost unconsciously to rest on her stomach. Let's just say, she said, our family will be welcoming a new member very soon. Dante's eyes widened. Then his face split into the most radiant smile Elena had ever seen. He strode onto the stage, swept her into his arms, and kissed her forehead in front of 1,000 cameras and 1,000,000 watching eyes. 6 months later, Elena sat in their garden in Connecticut. The new house was nothing like the Manhattan fortress. It was warm, bright, filled with sunlight and laughter, and the smell of fresh flowers. A golden retriever dozed on the porch. Wind chimes sang in the breeze. Elena watched from her chair as Dante chased Lucia across the lawn. Her husband, former crime lord, now devoted father, pretended to stumble and fall dramatically while their daughter shrieked with delight and pounced on him. Elena's hand rested on her rounded belly. 6 months along, a boy, the doctor said. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The bridge over the Rio Grande where she had nearly ended everything. The mansion of monsters where she had found love. The battles fought and won. The family forged in darkness and reborn in light. Lucia ran over, breathless and grinning. She placed her small hand on Elena's belly, feeling for movement. Mommy, she said she had called Elena that for 2 years now. Ever since the wedding, can I name the baby? Elena smiled. What name would you choose? Lucia's gray eyes grew serious. She thought for a long moment, her little face scrunched in concentration. Daniel, she said finally. Like Grandpa in heaven. Elena's breath caught. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pulled her daughter into her arms. Perfect, she whispered. That's the perfect name. Dante joined them, wrapping his strong arms around both of them. The 3 of them held each other in the sun-drenched garden while birds sang and leaves rustled, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed. And in Elena's heart, she heard Nana Carmen's voice one last time. Find those who need you most. Use these hands, this heart, to heal them. She had found them. She had healed them. And in doing so, she had healed herself. Darkness is real. Fear is real. Pain is real. But love is also real. Hope is also real. Healing is also real. And dawn always comes.